I wore my lavender shirt that morning, the one with the pearl buttons tiny and delicate, the same ones Tobias used to twist between his fingers when he was a baby. I remember how he'd climb into my lap, tugging gently on them, babbling nonsense and drooling on my collar. He was always so curious, so bright-eyed. Today I also wore the pearl earrings he gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12. Cheap, probably from the dollar store, but wrapped in tissue and offered with a grin so wide I nearly cried. I'd kept them in my jewelry box all these years, tucked beside broken bangles and spare safety pins. I thought maybe today was the right day to wear them again. Before he came, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the scarf over my thinning hair. I tried to smile to see what he might see, but the mirror didn't lie. It never did. What stared back at me was a tired elderly woman, pale skin stretched over fragile bones. Chemo had stolen the fullness of my cheeks, the color from my lips. I looked like a ghost. Still I grinned. Hope is a stubborn thing. I imagined him walking through the door, sniffing the air, and teasing me about burning the cookies like he used to. Maybe he'd plop down on the couch and ask me to try on hats for the wedding just for fun. Maybe I'd get to help fold the napkins or taste the frosting samples. Just little things. I didn't need much just to feel like his mother again. I was still his mommy. That had to mean something. When he finally arrived, he didn't knock. Just opened the door like he always used to. He wore a sharp jacket, smelled of cologne, and walked with that confident air he'd picked up over the years. I was already standing when he said it, but the words still knocked me off my feet. I think it's best if you don't attend the wedding. Just like that. Not angry, not ashamed, just practical. Like he was discussing furniture placement. I stared at him. The tea was steeped just right. The cookies sat untouched on a china plate I'd saved for special occasions. He didn't even glance at them. It's a highly curated affair, he added, straightening his collar. Very modern, clean aesthetic, minimalist. You don't want your mother in the pictures? I asked gently. It's not about pictures, he said quickly. It's about presentation. You've been unwell. The scarf, the coughing. It might make some guests uncomfortable. Something in me cracked. Not broke, but shifted. I felt it. Right there. The realization that I was no longer welcome. Not because of anything I'd done, but because I didn't fit the look. I'd sit in the back, I said softly. I wouldn't be in the way. I just want to see you get married. Before he could answer, she walked in. Kendra. Tall. Thin. Hair slicked back like a woman from a fashion magazine. Her eyes scanned the room like she was appraising a garage sale. So this is the place? She said, not quite to me. Cozy. Very vintage. Kendra, this is my mother, Tobias offered. She nodded without looking at me. Nice to meet you. I was a guest in my own living room. We finalized the seating chart, she continued, and the dress code. It's about the vibe. She meant I didn't belong. She's sick. She added, voice low and cool. It's admirable you're trying, but the whole scarf and sick look, it's not going to work. It's going to make people uncomfortable. Tobias nodded. We'll send you photos. We'll even FaceTime you in. It'll be like you're there. I didn't want to be like I was there. I wanted to be there. Maybe Kendra said we can talk after the honeymoon. About long-term care. Something peaceful, quiet, clean. You mean a nursing home, I replied. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Tobias said, sighing. I'm trying to be respectful. I looked at him. Really looked. The same eyes I rocked to sleep. The same mouth that used to kiss me goodnight. I gave you everything, I whispered. He stood. And I appreciate that. But you can't guilt-trip me forever. Then he said the words that would burn in my chest long after they left his lips. This is why Dad left you. And that was it. No explosion, no storm, just silence. My body sat down before I could command it. The cookies were still untouched, the tea still warm. They left soon after. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't pray. I just stood at the window watching their car disappear. Then I whispered to the emptiness, "Thank you for showing me who you really are." And in that moment, I tightened the scarf not to hide, but to hold myself together. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I sat in my faded armchair by the window, still wrapped in my lavender shirt and scarf, the same one they couldn't bear to look at. My hands folded in my lap bones, pressing against skin, and I just stared into the dark. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I didn't cry. I just kept replaying the conversation word for word, like a scratch on a record that wouldn't let me move forward. "You'll ruin the photos. It might make people uncomfortable. This is why Dad left you." The last one stung the most. Michael left because he was a coward. He couldn't handle fatherhood. He didn't want to work 2 jobs or love a woman whose body bore the marks of sacrifice, stretch marks, fatigue, worry lines. He didn't want the reality of family. I never told Tobias the truth. I painted his father as tired, not absent. Flawed, not cruel. I let him believe maybe, just maybe, his father had loved him once. It was the least I could do. Now Tobias was grown, polished, beautiful, cold, just like his father. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up in the early hours of dawn, the sky just beginning to lighten. I stood slowly, bones creaking, the chill of the floor curling up through my slippers. I walked to the kitchen, put the tea kettle on, and made toast I didn't eat. Then I went to my room. Everything was neat. My bed made, my Bible still open on the nightstand. I knelt with effort beside the closet and opened the old metal filing cabinet hidden beneath old coats and blankets. Inside, under tax returns and birth certificates, was a thick folder labeled in neat black ink vinyl. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. I opened it. Inside were my life's work, my will insurance policies, property deeds, and bank statements. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't poor either. I had built something, quietly, carefully, with every clipped coupon and every missed luxury. 3 rental homes, a stake in Sheila's beauty salon, modest accounts that added up over decades. No one knew, not even Tobias. I had planned to surprise him someday. I'd imagined him opening the folder after my funeral, eyes wide with wonder, as he read the letter I'd left. "You always thought I had nothing, but I saved this for you, because I believed in your future. That was the plan, but plans change." I looked at the will. Tobias's name was there, my only child, the sole beneficiary. I opened my nightstand drawer and took out the letter opener Tobias had given me in college, gold-plated with my initials etched at the base. It had been a proud gift. "For when you're rich," he joked. I used it to tear the will in half, then in quarters, then again until the pieces fluttered like confetti across my comforter. And for the first time in days, I felt light. That afternoon I called my oldest friend, Monique Chambers, church sister, choir partner, my lawyer. She answered on the second ring. "Lorraine," she asked, voice groggy, "you okay?" "No," I said simply, "but I will be. Can you come by this afternoon? I need to rewrite my will." There was a pause. "Then is this about Tobias?" "He came by yesterday. Told me not to come to the wedding. Said I'd ruin the aesthetic. Kendra said I should be put in a home." He just stood there. Silence. "Bring everything," I said. "I already know who I want to leave it to." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm dying, Monique. But not today. Today I'm just taking back what's mine." She exhaled slowly. I'll bring everything. Monique arrived just past noon. She didn't knock. She never had to. We had been friends since we were girls in pressed choir robes, whispering during Easter rehearsals, sharing everything from secrets to heartbreak. She knew my silences, the meaning behind the way I sat, the way I held a teacup when my hands trembled. She walked in briefcase in hand, her navy pantsuit, crisp face, calm but watchful. Tea's ready, I said even though it was cold. Doesn't matter, she replied. We've got work to do. We sat at the dining table. My yellow legal pad waited beside a plate of untouched toast. The words I'd written last night were shaky in places the ink smudged where my fingers lost strength, but the meaning was clear. I slid the pad across the table. Monique read it carefully, quietly. She didn't ask questions. She simply opened her briefcase, pulled out fresh will documents, and started to write. The sound of her pen was steady, certain. Did I ever tell you why I started saving? I asked. She didn't look up. You said you wanted Tobias to never go without. I nodded. That was part of it. But it was more than that. I looked toward the window, the light filtering through sheer curtains. I watched too many women die broke. Women who worked just as hard as me. Women who gave their whole lives to husbands, who left kids who forgot jobs that paid them dust. I swore I'd never go out like that. Monique scribbled something at the bottom of a form. And you won't. You're going out loud. I smiled faintly. I was going to surprise him. Letters, too. One for every birthday until he turned 50. They're in a shoebox under my bed. She paused. What'll you do with them now? I looked down at my hands. Burn them. He doesn't get those anymore. He doesn't get me. We worked in silence. I provided account numbers, addresses of properties, the name of my banker at Citizens Trust. The title to the beauty salon co-owned with Sheila. Even the envelope of cash in my sewing drawer, $10,000 wrapped in rubber bands labeled in case the world ends. Monique listed every asset, every detail. At the top of the new will, I dictated the name of my new beneficiary, the Rose House Foundation. Monique looked up surprised. All of it. Every cent. You don't want to leave anything to Tobias. I didn't hesitate. I already left him my whole life. That's enough. She nodded, her pen moving again. It took over an hour. By the time we finished, my signature was shaky, but it was mine. And it was final. Then I reached into a drawer and pulled out one last item, a sealed envelope, Tobias's name, handwritten across the front. This is for him. When do you want him to have it? Monique asked. Not yet. Let him smile at his wedding. Let him show off his perfect life. I looked at her eyes steady. Then give it to him. Right there, in front of everyone. Lorraine, she whispered, you really want to make a scene? I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm ending one. We both sat in silence. Outside, the wind pushed gently at the window pane. When she stood to leave, I placed the envelope in her hands. Promise me something. Anything. Don't let him cry and change your mind. Don't let him hug you. Don't let him beg. Give it to him exactly when I said. Monique looked me in the eye. I promise. After Monique left, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I walked slowly to my bedroom, one hand on the wall for balance. My body was so light it felt like it could float, but not from joy. From surrender. From release. I knew what I had to do next. I bent down beside my bed and pulled out the old shoebox where I had kept the birthday letters. There were dozens of them neatly folded and tied with string. One for every birthday Tobias would have up until he turned 50. They were filled with hope. If you're reading this on your 30th birthday, I hope you found someone kind. If today is your wedding anniversary, remember to hold hands even when you argue. If you're ever feeling lost, Remember that you were always my son before anything else. They weren't just letters. They were pieces of my heart preserved in ink. Words written on nights when the pain was sharp, but the love was sharper. I carried the box to the kitchen, took out the letters one by one, ripped them in half, dropped them into the trash can. The letter for his 30th birthday. The one for the first time he became a father. The one that simply said, I forgive you, even if you never ask me to. Gone. By the time I was done, my hands smelled like ink and ash. But my heart felt clean. Lighter. As though I had taken back something I didn't know I'd given away. I washed my hands slowly, watching the water swirl black with ink. Then I looked up at my reflection in the kitchen window. My scarf was still tied, my skin pale, my eyes tired, but they were still mine, and in them I saw something I hadn't in a long time resolve. I whispered to myself, I'm not done yet, and when I'm done, the whole world will know my name. 4 days before the wedding, the invitation came. It was tucked between a coupon catalog and a letter from my oncologist, a thick envelope with gold script and embossed trim. The return address wasn't Tobias's, it was from Cousin Renee, the family's unofficial gossip queen. I opened it on the porch, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a glossy photo of Tobias and Kendra under a white floral arch. Him in a tux, her in a sparkling fitted dress. Their smiles polished and hollow. The card read, We'd love for you to join us and celebrate this special day. Quietly, of course. Please sit in the designated family section and respect the couple's wishes. We love Renee. I almost laughed. Of course it wasn't Tobias who sent the invite. Of course it came with stipulations. I placed the card on the kitchen counter, and I knew my answer immediately. I would go. Not for them, not to be seen, but for myself, because I had one final thing to do. On the morning of the wedding, I rose before dawn. The house was still. I bathed slowly, my hands pausing over the bones of my chest. I dressed in the gray suit I wore on Easter Sundays, then wrapped my head in a navy scarf threaded with silver. I pinned my mother's dove brooch to my lapel, a small symbol of flight, of freedom. When Monique arrived, she looked me over but said nothing, just opened her briefcase, handed me a bottle of water and tissues, and tucked the sealed envelope in her bag. Are you sure you want to go through with it? She asked. I want to see it, I said. Just once. I want to see how far he thinks he's come. We drove in silence toward the vineyard. The vineyard was beautiful in a way that made me ache. Rolling hills bathed in sunlight, rows of white roses in bloom. A string quartet played soft jazz under a silk canopy. Guests in pastel dresses and champagne-colored suits strolled about with flutes of sparkling wine, laughing lightly like the world had never been cruel. It looked like something out of a catalog, and in many ways it was, curated, polished, expensive, paid for in part by me. Monique parked the car and helped me out gently. I was slower than I used to be, thinner, frailer, but my spine was straight and my heart steady. I wore my soft gray church suit and a navy scarf threaded with silver, the same one I wore on Easter Sunday, the year Tobias graduated college. I pinned a silver dove brooch, my mother's, at my collar. It gleamed gently in the sun. We didn't speak much as we approached the seating area. No one recognized me. To them, I was just another elderly woman, quiet, perhaps a cousin or an aunt, twice removed. I walked with a cane, moved slowly, and didn't smile. And in that way, I fit their aesthetic. I sat in the third row, just as they'd instructed. Family but not foreground. I imagined Kendra saying with that tight, polite smile she wore like a badge. From where I sat, I could see the altar framed by cascading florals. The photographer floated around like a bee, buzzing and clicking, chasing perfection. I took a sip from my water bottle and waited. When the music changed, I knew the show was starting. Tobias walked down the aisle first, tall, proud, dressed in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage. His smile was blinding. He looked confident, accomplished, unbothered, and I wondered for a fleeting second if he even thought of me that morning, if he noticed my absence when he tied his cufflinks or adjusted his boutonniere. Kendra followed next. She was stunning. I'll give her that. The kind of beauty that came from control. Hair, sculpted makeup flawless, not a wrinkle in sight. Her dress sparkled in the sun as she walked the crowd, sighing in admiration. My eyes stayed on Tobias. He didn't look back. The officiant began, a man in a linen suit who spoke with practiced warmth, tossing in phrases about love, unity, and honoring those who raised you. Tobias didn't flinch when he said parents this time. He simply adjusted his stance and kept smiling. The vows were long. Kendra cried delicately. Tobias recited his with the charm of someone used to being praised. They exchanged rings. They kissed. The crowd erupted in applause. Everyone stood, except me. Monique leaned toward me. Now? Not yet, I whispered. The couple walked back up the aisle, hands clasped, faces glowing. People tossed flower petals in their path. A photographer caught every second. They paused at the floral arch to pose Shay, resting her head on his shoulder, he laughing mid-shot. Now, I said. Monique stood and walked forward. She moved like water, smooth, quiet, impossible to stop. Kendra saw her first brows furrowing. Tobias turned and froze when he recognized her. Congratulations, Monique said evenly. This is for you from your mother. She handed Tobias the manila envelope, then turned and handed a smaller one to Kendra. Before either could respond, she turned and walked back to me. Done, she said. I stood, slowly, my cane steady in my hand. From across the garden, I watched Tobias open the envelope. He read the new will. The pages shifted in his hands like thunder. His expression fell confusion, then disbelief, then fear. Kendra tore into her envelope, eyes skimming the handwritten note I'd left her. If you're marrying Tobias for what you think you're getting, I suggest you find a new dress and a new life. He has nothing now. He earned it. Lorraine Massey. Her face twisted. She looked at Tobias. What is this? What the hell does this mean? Tobias didn't answer. He just stood there holding the pages like they might catch fire. She left me nothing. He muttered. You said she was dying, Kendra hissed. She is? Then why didn't you fake it for one day? Her voice rose. 3 hours, Tobias. You couldn't pretend for 3 hours. She yanked her hand out of his, stepped back. I'm not marrying a broke man who can't even handle his own mother. Then she turned on her heel and stormed off her bouquet, dropping onto the lawn. Her bridesmaids scurried after her, heels clicking across stone. The music stopped. Guests whispered. Phones came out. And Tobias stood alone beneath the archway, the manila envelope fluttering in his hands like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He turned slowly, scanning the guests. His eyes searched the third row. But I was already gone. All that remained was my scarf, blue with silver stitching, folded gently on the seat. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I turned and walked away. Tobias stood frozen. The manila envelope trembled in his hands. Around him, guests clapped awkwardly, unsure if the ceremony was over or if a second act was beginning. The photographer lowered his camera. One of the bridesmaids whispered something to another. People were watching now, not the bride, not the groom, but the mess unraveling beneath the floral arch. And I was gone. I didn't need to stay. I didn't need to see the fallout. But Monique did. She told me later how he stood there, unmoving eyes darting across the crowd, like he was hoping someone would step in, tell him this wasn't happening. Kendra stood at his side for one more breath. Then she was gone too. "You let her humiliate me?" she hissed. "You let her sit right there, in the third row. You told me she wasn't coming." Tobias opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Kendra was already storming down the aisle, the guests parting like a sea of confusion. Her bouquet lay forgotten in the grass. The wedding had ended. Not with a kiss, but with the silence I'd been saving for years. They say weddings bring people together, but my absence had torn them apart. Monique returned to the car with a quiet dignity. She didn't speak until we were halfway back to Charleston. "You did what you came to do." I nodded, eyes on the road, the scarf still warm around my neck. I gave him everything I said, and he gave me nothing. That night, I made tea and watched the street lamp flicker on outside my window. The same lamp that used to light up Tobias's face when he came home from school. His backpack used to bounce against his shoulders as he ran up the steps, breathless and hungry for cookies and hugs. Now there was only silence, and I welcomed it. The next morning, Monique delivered the final envelope sealed and hand-addressed to my lawyer. The obituary ran 2 days later. It was short, dignified, false. Lorraine Elizabeth Massey passed peacefully survived by her son Tobias Massey. Let the world believe what it wanted. I had no interest in correcting it. I didn't want flowers, or pity, or closure. I wanted freedom. 3 days later, I left Charleston. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't pack much. Just my scarf, a worn passport, and one letter, "Monique, it's done. Thank you. Don't come looking. Love, L." I live now in a coastal village in southern Spain. The air smells like sea salt and orange blossom. My house is small white, with blue shutters and terracotta tiles that stay warm underfoot. My neighbors call me Allie. They don't ask questions. I grow basil and mint in clay pots. I buy fresh bread every morning. The woman at the flower stall knows I like white lilies. She saves them for me without saying a word. I have enough money to live simply, not lavishly, just enough. Enough is a beautiful word. Back home, I hear whispers. Monique keeps me informed through short factual letters. The Rose House Foundation renamed their main shelter Massey Hall. My story went viral, apparently. Someone uploaded a photo of me from years ago, standing with the other women at Rose House, serving food, laughing. The caption read, "She gave us everything her family threw away." Donations poured in. I didn't ask for attention, but I'm glad it happened. Women wrote their own stories. Hashtags bloomed like wildflowers. Lorraine deserved better. Walmart grandma with a final word. Walmart silent. Inheritance. They say I died with dignity. The truth, I lived with it. They say the dead are at peace. But I found peace in being alive and finally unknown. In this small coastal village in southern Spain, I am no one, and it is glorious. The air smells of salt and citrus. The mornings arrive slow, golden, and quiet. The sea sings the same tune every night, like a lullaby. The market vendors know my face, but not my name. They call me Senora Allie. I smile, I answer. No one here knows what I left behind, and I don't tell them. I rent a small white home with blue shutters and ivy curling over the walls. It has a courtyard where I grow basil, mint, and rosemary in cracked clay pots. A striped cat visits some mornings and naps on my doorstep. I don't feed it, but it stays. My days are simple. I walk to the village market each morning with a woven bag and enough euros for bread, cheese, and lilies. The flower vendor, Isabella, always saves the white lilies for me. She doesn't ask why I prefer them. No one asks me anything here. I write sometimes little no-we, observations, prayers. Nothing grand, just small things. Words that keep me tethered to the earth. The sun always comes back. Some silences are holy. You are allowed to begin again. These aren't diary entries. I don't record my past. I've released it. I've burned the weight of remembrance. But the present, I cradle it. And for the first time in decades, I have no one to perform for. No one to please. No one expecting me to shrink to fit their picture frame. I am only me. And I am enough. News travels even across oceans. One morning, while peeling oranges in the courtyard, I received a letter from Monique. She always writes in short, practical sentences. Kendra filed for annulment the day after the wedding. Foundation received $2.3 million in donations after the story went viral. Photo of you at the shelter is now part of a permanent exhibit. No signature. Just Massey Hall is thriving. Thought you'd like to know. I folded the letter gently and set it on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I felt still. Like something had found its rightful place. That afternoon I walked down to the sea. The tide was low, the air cool. I sat on a bench and watched the waves. Nearby a child chased gulls shrieking with joy. An old man mended a fishing net. A couple held hands, saying nothing. Life went on beautiful and ordinary. I thought of Tobias then, not with anger, not even with sadness, just stillness. He would be facing silence now, not mine, but his own. The silence that comes after the cameras are gone, after the bride has left, after the guests stop calling, the kind of silence that echoes. I had lived with it once. Now it was his turn. One evening, as dusk settled over the rooftops, I lit a candle in the window. Not for mourning, but for closure. I sat with a warm blanket on my knees and a cup of herbal tea in my hands. The pages of a new book lay open on my lap. But I didn't read. I watched the flame flicker and whispered, "You were always my sun, but you don't get to be my ending." Then I blew the candle out. And that too was enough. I never told Tobias I survived. Never sent a postcard, never returned a call, though I'm sure he tried both eventually. Not out of love, but out of panic. Out of damage control. Out of desperation to undo the story he wrote for himself. But some stories once told cannot be untold. Letting the world believe I had died was easier than explaining the woman I had become. Letting him grieve a version of me he buried alive was the cleanest revenge I could offer. Monique told me he tried everything, begged the lawyer to reverse the will, tried to argue I wasn't of sound mind, claimed undue influence. But the documents were sealed, witnessed, irrevocable. He had lost me long before the signatures. I never hated my son. That's the strange part people struggle to understand. I loved him, still do in some small, unreachable corner of my heart. But love without respect is erosion. And over time it wore me thin, until all that remained was a shell he barely glanced at. I used to dream of reconciliation. Back when the treatments made me weak, and prayer was all I had left, I would picture him sitting beside me, remorseful, quiet, holding my hand. But that boy never came. Only the man who said, "You'll ruin the aesthetic." I heard he sold the tux. He needed the money. I heard Kendra's family issued a formal statement distancing themselves from the embarrassment, that the wedding photos were never posted, that guests whispered his name at parties, but not with admiration. That silence followed him everywhere. And still, I said nothing. Because what is there to say when the world finally sees someone the way you always did? I didn't dance on the ashes. I didn't smile when I heard he moved into a smaller apartment, or when he withdrew from public life. I simply lit a candle each year on his birthday and whispered into the flame, "You were born from love." You were raised with hope. And you taught me what it means to be forgotten by the one you remember most. One afternoon, Monique sent one final letter. He tried to sue again. It didn't work. I gave him your last letter. It was the one I had written in Charleston just before leaving for Spain. Folded, sealed, addressed in the handwriting he once recognized as mine. In it, I had written Tobias, I adored you. And you spat on it. I gave you everything you asked for and more. I would have given you the world if you hadn't told me I didn't belong in it. So now I live in a world where you don't exist. Goodbye, Mom. No apology, no redemption arc, just truth. I've learned that silence has many textures. The silence of a home emptied by grief is different from the silence of peace. The silence of erasure is different from the silence of choice. Tobias is now a man who carries his silence like an anchor. And I wear mine like a crown. Sometimes I wonder if anyone picked up the scarf. The one I left on the third-row chair, folded neatly stitched with silver thread, still faintly scented with lavender and chamomile tea. I didn't leave it by accident. I wanted it to stay. Let someone find it and wonder. Let someone hold it and ask, who was she? Maybe they'll tell stories about me, how I arrived without fanfare, sat like a ghost and disappeared like smoke. Maybe they'll call it grace, or quiet vengeance, or a final word spoken without sound. Truth is, I didn't leave the scarf behind to haunt him. I left it to set myself free. Back in Charleston, people kept talking, not just about the scandal or the wedding collapse, but about the woman behind it, about the mother who gave everything and walked away without looking back. They filled in the blanks with legend. She left millions to a shelter. She planned it for years. She died the next day. She's living in Paris. She's watching him, waiting for him to apologize. None of it true. All of it delicious. What none of them knew is I didn't need to watch. The world would do it for me. And it did. Massey Hall received so many donations, they opened a second branch. They started a scholarship fund for women over 50 going back to school. They named it the Lorraine Fund. My name, which once made people look away, now made them lean in. I don't need them to know my face. They remember the scarf. Tobias never tried to find me after that last letter. Or if he did, he didn't succeed. Monique said he stopped showing up at the firm, stopped calling, that the last time she saw him, he looked small, like the world had taken something from him he didn't know he'd lost until it was too late. She didn't pity him. Neither did I. I mourned who he could have been, who I raised him to be, but I would not resurrect him, not even in memory. There's a kind of poetry in being erased and then remembered for the right reasons, in vanishing and somehow being everywhere. I'm told some professor now teaches my story in a women's studies course, that the scarf was displayed once at a fundraiser, draped on a velvet stand like a relic, that someone wrote a poem inspired by the photo of my folded hands at Massey Hall. She left the room, but the room never left her. I didn't write that line, but I felt it. One night, sitting under the stars, I whispered to the dark, "This is for every woman who gave and gave until she was only a shadow in her own story. And the sky in return gave me silence, the kind I chose, the kind that heals." I still wake early, old habits, I suppose. I open the shutters just as the sun peeks over the water. The sea sparkles like crushed glass, and for a moment the world holds its breath. I make tea mint from my own garden and sit in the courtyard with a wool blanket over my knees. My bones are tired, but my spirit is sharper than ever. There is no rush here. No one waiting for me to explain myself. No one calling to ask for money. No doorbell carrying regret. Just the rustle of leaves, the flicker of birds, and the soft hush of the tide. I am a woman alone, and I am not lonely. Sometimes I imagine a different ending. One where Tobias did come back. One where he sat at the edge of my hospital bed and wept like a boy, not a man polished by pride. One where he saw me not as a flaw to be hidden, but as the woman who shaped his life. But that isn't the story I lived, and that's okay, because I got something rarer than an apology. I got the final word. Not in anger, not in fire, but in silence. People still write about me. An essay here, a think piece there, a foundation gala using my name, a scarf hung in tribute beside flowers, and folded notes written by other women with bruised hearts and buried names. And sometimes they find me. They don't know who I am, not really. But they come close. A woman will pause at the fruit stall and say, "You remind me of someone who left a legacy." Or a young girl will smile shyly and offer me her place in line. Or Isabella, my flower vendor, will hand me the lilies without asking. I nod, I thank them, and I go home. The greatest gift I ever gave myself was permission to let go of roles I was forced into, to shed the names people gave me, ugly, burdensome, irrelevant, to write my story not in grief, but in power. There was a time when I thought motherhood was the end of my identity, but now I know it was only a chapter, and I've lived many since. One morning, I woke to the sound of music in the square. A celebration, I suppose. I stood at the window and watched young people dancing skirts, swirling like watercolor. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because this was not a funeral. It was life, bright, chaotic, beautiful. And I was still here. When I die, and one day I will, it won't be dramatic. No speeches, no photos of me in faded frames. Just a note left in a drawer next to a tin of tea I lived. I loved. I left on my own terms. That is enough. I'm not gone. Just beyond.